Story 1. I live in this upper-class liberal town in Ohio called Bexley. Everyone in this town acts like complete self-righteous, narcissistic, entitled boneheads and feel that they are better than everyone else. People buy their kids new luxury cars when they hit 16. My neighbor got a brand new BMW for passing her driving exam. It sounds absurd, but it's just how Bexley is. One other thing about Bexley is that people from Bexley drive like the road is their private racetrack. They blow through stop signs, turn left on red, and park wherever their car can fit. I am one of the few kids in Bexley who works a job to pay for his own college. Small rent to live at home. I'm 20, and 18 was the limit for my parents' car and car insurance. I am grateful that my parents pay for my home food, heat and AC, electricity, phone bill, etc. I get about 5 hours of sleep a night. So one day about a month ago, I decided to grab some sushi after the morning shift at work. This sushi place is right by a small private college within Bexley called Capital University. I pull into the lot to find one empty space, and I pull in. I get out, go into the sushi joint, and spend maybe a half an hour there. After a great lunch, I go back to see my car is blocked into space by a huge gray GMC Yukon. I was blocked in the spot, as the parking spaces have those concrete bumps in front to separate the spots. I took a picture of the license plate just for reference. Well, I just waited patiently for the car owner to show back up, because maybe there were no spots to park in at the time, and my car just happened to be the one, as well as 2 other cars next to mine, of course. About 10 minutes later, a woman, maybe 35 years old, shows up and sees me in my car listening to music. She knocks on my window and tells me that I need to turn my music down and that us college kids are ruining her city. First of all, I go to Ohio State and not Capital. I look at her blankly, as my music isn't that loud, and am wondering how she assumes I go to Capital. She yells in my face, "Wake up, you spoiled brat." Now I had no clue who this crazy woman was, and I just turned my music off and shut the window and continued waiting for the car owner to move their car. Well, the woman pulls keys out of her purse and hops in her gargantuan GMC Yukon, and screeches away, spattering mud on my car, which I paid for and paid to clean. I was the brat. This woman has the audacity to seal 3 cars in and complain that my music is too loud. I was 15 minutes late back to work that day. I am never late. This was the first time I was late to work, and I hope it was the last. I swore that if I ever saw her again, I would do to her what she had done to me. Well, fast forward a month later to what is today. I decided to grab some sushi after taking an exam, and went to the same sushi place, in the same parking lot, to see the same gray GMC Yukon taking up both of the last 2 spots in the lot. I am on cloud 9 at this moment, and park right next to the driver's side of her car, making sure I was in a spot, and that she couldn't get into her car. There was about 5 inches between my passenger door and her driver door. I leave my car, grab sushi to go, and patiently sit in my car. Well, what do you know? About 15 minutes later, the woman walks up to her double-parked car to see that I had sealed her in. I hear her yelling that she is going to sue the person who did this. She sees me listening to music in the car that is blocking her from leaving. She approaches my car and demands I move. I tell her, "You got into the spot, you can get out of the spot." She threatens to call the cops, and I just laugh. I know the laws, and even have a thin blue line flag bumper sticker on my car. She calls the cops, and within 1 minute, a cop shows up. I get out of my car, and the woman starts yelling at the cop about how I had sealed her in. I told the cop I was trying to park within the space. The cop looks at her car, and then looks at mine, and looks so disappointed after. The officer says to the woman to be happy I didn't have her car towed. He also said that she needs to move her car within the next minute, or he'll ticket her for parking illegally. Angrily, the woman climbs in her passenger door and is struggling to reach the driver's side. She is throwing garbage out of her car in a fit, gets in, and moves her car over to drive. The cop knocks on her window and orders her to pick up her trash. She says to him, "Well, isn't that what garbage men do?" I am trying so hard to keep a straight face, but I just start laughing because of her stupid remark. At this point, the woman looks at me, and it seems she finally remembered who I was. Looking very mad, she sighs, gets out of her car, picks up her trash, and gets back into her car. The cop gets back into his car and tries to pull away, as the woman jerks her car out of the spot, nearly hitting the cop car, and speeds to the end of the lot, where she stops at the red light. The woman, forgetting that she isn't the queen of the world, and speeding is illegal, immediately gets pulled over. This lot is about 40 feet wide, and the woman is about 20 feet from me, so I can hear her. She starts yelling to the cop, "Reckless driving." And I know exactly what is going on. I get back in my car, turn the music back on, and start thanking God for giving me this satisfaction. I pull away from the lot to have the greatest sense of fulfillment I have ever had in my life. Story 2. As a trucker, I usually have to rely 100% upon public restrooms, either they be in truck stops or in highway rest areas, when I need to take restroom breaks. To set the scene, I had stopped at a truck stop to take one of these much-needed bathroom breaks. It was one of the bigger chains, a chain which coincidentally had changed its billing from truck stop to travel center, in hopes of attracting more stops from the regular motoring public. Before all of this began, truck stops changing their billing, we truckers got to enjoy mostly respectable places. Nice restaurants, good selections of trucker gear, flashlights, tools, straps, chains, and on good old-fashioned hardware for truckers, and among the most important of all, nice and well-maintained clean restrooms. Ever since the motoring public became more ubiquitous in these stops, however, all of this started to change. Restaurants were replaced with fast food. Hardware was replaced by tourist nonsense and travel toys and junk electronics mostly for cars, and most of all, the state of the restrooms started going downhill. You get the picture, right? Our restrooms started looking just like restrooms from places like subway stations and bus terminals. Toilet paper all over the floors of the stalls, unflushed toilets, wads of wet paper towels left all over the sink counters, and most annoyingly of all, pee on many of the toilet seats. It was maddening. Because we truckers, you see, have kind of a loosely bound fraternity. Nothing quite so organized, but certainly a deeply ingrained respect for our fellow drivers. When we would use the facilities, we would always do our best to leave them clean for the next driver who came behind us. It was an unspoken respect which ran deep in our industry. Enter the motoring public though, and you get I don't care about teenagers, small kids leaving messes, too, and even adults who either thought it was funny, or who just plain didn't care about whatever messes they left behind them. Well, here I was. I had picked up a load out of Los Angeles earlier that day, and I was already pretty miffed from all of the horrendous traffic I had been forced to deal with all day. And if anybody is familiar with I-15 coming north out of the LA area, they'll know that there isn't any place with decent facilities for truckers to stop at, until we get up close to Barstow, around 100 miles or so. So in addition to being already burned out from the day, the long drive without any stops had left me needing to go to the bathroom pretty badly. So I get parked, breathe a huge sigh of relief from being able to finally take a much-needed break, and especially find relief at last, and then lock my truck up and hurry into the truck stop, making a beeline for the bathroom to finally get that much-needed relief. First toilet is clogged, a huge mass of nastiness in it. Sigh. The second stall, too, along with a huge mess of sodden and trampled toilet paper all over the floor around the toilet. One stall left, but there was someone in it. Sigh. I have to wait a few minutes more, so I just consign myself to waiting, kicking back against a sink counter to bide the time. When finally, this kid comes out of the stall. I say kid, but he was a teenager. Moreover, he was one of these long-haired punker types, complete with nose ring, ear piercings, and a death metal band t-shirt on. So the state of youth these days, I could personally care less. He's not my kid, and I just need to use the restroom. However, this kid gives me this nasty little smirk when he sees me waiting, then turns to head out of the restroom, not even stopping to wash his hands. I sigh and lean up from the counter and start for the just freed up stall. And what do I see? You guessed it. Huge amounts of very deeply yellow urine all over the toilet seat and all over the floor around the toilet. Hey. He stops, turns, still wearing that little smirk, which turns even more smarmy as he turns, and he purrs out in an insulting tone. What? You left pee all over this toilet. If anything, his smirk turned even more insulting, evolving right into a nasty little slash of a grin under haughty, challenging eyes. Yeah, so what, he said, his voice an even more deeply insulting purr now. What are you going to do about it? And that is when his eyes widened, his nasty little smirk vanishing, the challenge in his eyes turning to uncertainty, followed immediately by outright fear. That is because I had started toward him with juggernaut-like directness and intent. He knew he was in trouble. He turned to try to bolt out of there. However, his hand missed the handle to the exit door in his sudden panic, and he came face up against the door. Which is when I grabbed myself a whole fistful of punk boy long hair from the back and hauled his haughty little self back into the bathroom by it. I am going to make you clean it, I informed him through clenched teeth, right next to his pierced ear, and then proceeded to frog-mark him back to the stall by his hair. The short of it was that I did make him clean it. He pulled several paper towels from a nearby dispenser and cleaned the floor, then did the same with the toilet seat, with some wetted paper towels. All while I stood over him, a very unamused giant, my thickened arms, I did flatbed back then, so was immensely strong, folded across my chest, and my hard eyes never once wavering from his progress. When he was done, he stood between me and the toilet, his small hands clasped in front of him, his eyes down on his black tennis shoes. Is this okay, sir? Is it okay if I go now? In response, I gave a little snort of a grunt, let my arms fall relaxedly to my sides, and turned so he could proceed past me, which he took as said permission and made a hasty scurry out of there. Story 3. This really unwell man who subscribes to dangerous online ideologies asked me out a few years ago. I said no, I'm married, I love my husband, and I have no interest in entertaining anyone else. Right away, the way this person spoke to me was completely inappropriate. He didn't even attempt a polite introduction or acknowledge that I was already taken. It was clear he had bought into harmful rhetoric spread by influencers like Andrew Tate, parroting nonsense with no basic sense of social decency. He came across as a follower of a warped ideology that promotes entitlement and bitterness, with no awareness of how out of line his behavior was. He seemed obsessed with the harmful narratives pushed by so-called black pill communities, these fringe groups that promote hopelessness and resentment in men, particularly around dating. He appeared to believe that if a man has even one redeeming quality, then women choosing someone other than him must be due to some perceived conspiracy of hypergamy, a term those communities use to claim that women only pursue higher status partners. He ignored the fact that this belief is inherently dehumanizing, not only to women but to men as well. He openly dismissed intelligent men as just being wallets and kind-hearted men as being pushovers, while admitting in the same breath that he himself had no redeeming qualities. It didn't seem to register with him how self-defeating that logic was. He was also so insecure about his height that he thought women dating average height men were committing some kind of betrayal against him. His worldview was so far removed from reality that it bordered on delusion. This man is average-looking and has a job. There is no reason some woman just not me wouldn't eventually be interested in him if he developed a likable personality. While he isn't the most exciting person, he could easily be a safe and stable choice for someone looking to settle down and start a life in a quiet town. So I don't see the issue, at least, not one serious enough to justify bothering me about it. I have my own needs and experiences, and those are fulfilled by my husband. I am not shallow like this individual. I think deeply, I moralize less, and I appreciate originality. I find people with independent thoughts attractive. Sadly, I don't believe this man has ever had a single original idea. Everything he parrots seems copied and misunderstood from someone online who profits off keeping vulnerable men single, bitter, and stuck in a cycle of anger. He's simply too gullible when it comes to other men on the internet. He's not the kind of person I could ever admire or rely on. I'm not trying to be harsh, I'm just stating what I genuinely believe. In a word, he's too simple for me. What I want is for him to stop repeating tired cliches from fringe internet forums. It's a transparent attempt to hide the fact that he lacks independent thinking and is deeply insecure. My body is my own, and that truth is not up for debate. No one, least of all someone like him, gets to decide otherwise. His belief that people will someday support that absurd notion is completely detached from reality. The fact is, intimacy feels good, and most men still love and respect their wives and girlfriends. This man is a fringe figure, and nothing he promotes is ever going to become mainstream. He needs to wake up and accept actual reality, instead of pretending society is on the verge of becoming some dystopian nightmare tailored to his worldview. Anyone who wants that kind of society isn't someone who should be leading conversations or influencing others. Contrary to his harmful and unrealistic perspective, emotional fragility of that kind becomes a burden on the rest of society. And no, the community doesn't have to carry that weight for him. He talks about drains on the system, as though he isn't trying to become the biggest one himself, forcing his way into others' lives, simply because he can't adjust his way of thinking. I don't think he realizes how much regular, well-adjusted people genuinely dislike his delusional outlook. No, we're not about to install surveillance in every home just because he refuses to accept that the angry man he listens to on a self-help website might be misleading him. To be clear, my autonomy is not up for discussion. The fact that he's too emotionally immature to understand that isn't my responsibility. Grow up, please. And this whole, "you didn't bring enough for the whole class" mentality, where he hoards ideas and connection but gives nothing of value in return, is exactly why people don't want to engage with him. That's why it's important to learn how to be a kind, considerate person and how to get along with others. Honestly, it's disappointing that he chooses to believe anyone who tells him otherwise. He's so thoroughly embarrassing. He's not helping men, he's actually encouraging harm, both to them and to the people around them. The entire world is not obligated to be unhappy just because he is. Men are not evil, and they are not the problem here. But this man, this person actively trying to make others feel miserable and unsafe, is a problem. He needs to grow into a better version of himself and start treating people with basic decency. That's what it means when someone says, "man up." They don't mean to become aggressive or dominant. They mean it's admirable to be kind, responsible, and emotionally intelligent. Right now, he isn't showing any of that. He falls short of that standard every single time he opens his mouth to spew hurtful nonsense. And frankly, he should get that checked, because he has a serious habit of letting harmful, unfounded words spill out, and then acts confused when people don't like him for it. He's mistaken if he thinks it's his right to make decisions for anyone else. It's not. Nobody believes that being a spiteful, aggressive bully makes someone manly. It doesn't. We see him as a joke, and no one is lining up to change that perspective. Nobody cares about the entitlement he attaches to his existence. Even if one were to entertain his thinking for a second, which no one should, there are billions of other people with the same physical features as him who still understand that the world does not revolve around their dissatisfaction. There are only a handful of people out there who believe what he does, and they're often those who have misunderstood what healthy masculinity is supposed to look like. They aren't shining examples, they're simply blaming society for their own failure to grow. Story 4. This happened about 5-6 weeks ago, but I just heard the story firsthand yesterday. Was told the story secondhand weeks ago, but the guy telling the story admitted he did not see some of it and heard even less. A fellow restaurant owner in my area was doing take-out delivery only during the pandemic. When restaurants in our state were told we could open up for dine-in at 25%, he decided, as did I and many others, to not open, as it just wasn't worth it. All orders at his place, be it a delivery service or customer picking up a takeout order, was done outside. Nobody except employees were allowed inside. Orders were taken outside to the parking lot by an employee. This happened a few days after the 25% was announced. Enter Karen and her not Karen friend. They drive up and get out of the car. Employee is delivering a takeout order and sees Karen and her friend. Tells them the restaurant is not open for dine-in. Karen is not happy. Proceeds to scream how sick and tired she is of eating takeout, and they will serve her and her friend now. Employee tells her that is not going to happen. Karen kicks him in the leg. Employee manages to still get in front of her, so she can't get in the door. Karen doubles down and stomps on his foot. The owner, who witnessed the initial kick and subsequent stomp, tells an employee to call 911 while he runs out to help the employee. Karen, not knowing the police are already being called, screams to her friend to call the cops. Her friend has done nothing. She is frozen in place, in the middle of the parking lot, not believing what she is witnessing from Karen. Karen is still trying to get in the door, but can't as the employee she assaulted has fallen in front of the door. This would have been a good time for Karen and her friend to leave. Cop shows up and Karen thinks he is there to order the owner to let her and friend eat in. Oh, delusional Karen. Cop tells her he is there for a reported assault. Cop calls for an ambulance as a second cop shows up. Karen starts screaming that the employee is faking his injury as a third cop rolls up. She screams that she was the one assaulted by everyone within a quarter-mile radius. Typical Karen nonsense. Ambulance shows up and starts treating the employee. Owner invites one of the officers inside. Meanwhile, outside, Karen demands to leave. Nope, not happening. She has to stay while this is being investigated. Owner has cameras inside and outside. Karen's tirade is all on camera, including the person who was getting his food delivered by the employee. He had his camera rolling and got audio of Karen in all her glory. When told she could not leave and was going to be arrested, Karen reacted by screaming and pinching the cop on the arm so hard he had a bruise. Her friend never moved during all of this. Owner said her eyes looked like tennis balls bugging out of her head. She was allowed to leave as she did nothing. Employee had 2 broken toes. Yup, raging Karen stomped that hard. Karen was handcuffed, put in a police car, and taken to jail screaming all the way how she would have everyone's badge. Again, typical Karen nonsense. All of this because she was sick and tired of eating takeout. One of the cops came by the restaurant the next day to ask about the employee. He told the owner how in the last month or so there was an uptick in people getting arrested, banned from businesses, trespass orders who have never been in trouble with the law, in the age group of approx 55-70 years old. Yup. Karen, 58 years old, never been arrested, no problems at all, will likely serve some time in jail as well as being sued by the employee. Their reasoning: they are frustrated over this COVID-19 thing. Story 5. My 19-year-old mother has mistreated me and my 2 sisters for years physically, mentally, and verbally throughout our entire teenage lives. My sister, who is 20 years old, has frequently been having our mother babysit her 2-month-old overnight since the baby was a newborn. Every mother I've spoken to thinks this is unusual, but I understand that since I'm not a parent, my opinion doesn't carry much weight in this situation. Our mother has been inconsistent about whether she dislikes this arrangement. One night she's complaining, the next, she's asking to do it. It entirely depends on how she feels in the moment. She often comes to me and our other sister, who is 25 years old and has 2 children, to vent about it. We've both told her to have a conversation with our sister about it because we knew it would eventually lead to a conflict. When Christmas arrived, there had already been a few arguments due to our mother's lack of communication, so my sister was somewhat aware of the issue. Our grandmother was extremely ill, and my mother believed it would be her last Christmas, so she was determined to have our grandmother hold the baby. At one point, our grandmother did get to hold the baby while my mother wasn't around. My sister and our aunt were supposedly supervising, but neither of them were paying close attention. Unfortunately, our grandmother either forgot she was holding the baby or her arms were too weak to support the child, and she ended up dropping her slightly. Thankfully, since our grandmother was sitting, there was no real harm done, just a lot of understandable fear and panic. This is where my sister's and my mother's versions of the story begin to differ. My mother claims that my sister started acting disrespectful, while my sister insists she wasn't. Neither of them are entirely reliable in situations like this. My sister has been manipulative and has told blatant lies in the past, so I can't say for certain whether she was truly rude that night or if my mother was exaggerating. The truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Later, my mother became upset, saying that my sister had ruined our grandmother's last Christmas because she refused to let our grandmother hold the baby again. The situation escalated, and the two of them started arguing over text about whether my sister had been disrespectful or even unreasonable. My sister lives in an apartment above us, and she came downstairs to gather her things since she had left the baby there the previous night. At some point, she and my mother started arguing in person, and before long, it turned physical. My stepfather, who is in his late 50s, had to stand in the archway between the kitchen and the living room to keep them separated. I had to hold my mother back from my sister 3 times and my sister back from my mother twice, while my stepfather stood in the middle, trying to keep the peace. Eventually, I was given the task of taking my sister's things upstairs. I did so and told her boyfriend, who is also the baby's father, to stay upstairs and not come down unless I specifically told him to. He had the baby with him upstairs, and I knew from experience that it was never a good idea for boyfriends to get involved in our family fights. My mother has a habit of twisting the situation and even lying to the authorities. When I returned downstairs, my mother and sister were still screaming at each other over my stepfather's shoulder while he continued to block the archway. I stepped toward them, telling them to calm down, but neither of them listened. Eventually, my mother pointed out an inconsistency in my sister's statements, not necessarily a lie, just a contradiction in how she was expressing her feelings. That was the final straw for my sister, and she lost her temper, striking our mother in the face. My stepfather and I both shouted at her to leave immediately because we knew our mother would absolutely lose control after that. My sister finally went back upstairs, but my mother was already in a complete rage. Both my stepfather and I were dragged across the living room as we struggled to hold her back from chasing after my sister. Eventually, my mother gave up, or at least I thought she had. I turned around and went to my room for a moment, but when I came back out, I realized my stepfather had let her go outside. I stayed in the living room and asked him why he let her leave, and before he could even respond, we suddenly heard the sound of glass shattering. She had broken the window on my sister's front door. My mother was outside in the yard, pacing and screaming, calling my sister awful names. My stepfather and I rushed outside, trying to stop her from making the situation even worse. That was the last of the physical chaos, but the drama didn't end there. My mother continued trying to get any one of us to take her side, looking for validation in any way she could. Later, my boyfriend gave his own thoughts on the situation, saying that if he had been there to witness my mother fighting me, he would have, quote, taken out her already damaged legs and put her in a chokehold. I immediately told him that was not okay and made it clear that if he ever saw something like this happen again, he needed to stay out of it for the sake of everyone involved. In the end, no one was permanently harmed except for the window. I hope this story was wild enough to at least be entertaining, because writing it all out just reminded me of how completely bizarre the whole thing was. Not the worst Christmas I've had. I'd give it a 3/10. Probably wouldn't recommend. Story 6. So this happened in my 3rd year of high school, out of the 5 years of high school we have in the Netherlands, when I was about 15 years old. This year would be the first year where we would take chemistry classes, and I was absolutely stoked. I loved biology and science, so I figured I would love chemistry as well. The whole class was excited for our first chemistry lesson ever, as we had heard from older students that chemistry was a fun class with a ton of fun experiments, and at first sight, the teacher seemed like an awesome guy. Oh boy, were we all wrong. Note: this was the first year this teacher was working at our school. Now, my class had a few clowns who would make the occasional jokes, nothing too bad, they would still pay attention and respect the teacher overall. This teacher did not buy it, and would often let the whole class, although most of us had literally done nothing wrong, stay behind in class. When we would be late to our other classes, and when we would point out that he had made us stay behind, he would deny ever doing such a thing when the other teachers would ask him about it, and the whole class would get in trouble. Now, that wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing about this teacher was that, once he got slightly mad, which was extremely easy, all that had to happen was dropping a pencil. He would just stop teaching. He would just sit behind his desk, doing nonsense on his phone. I kid you not. Occasionally, if he was feeling generous, he would put on a YouTube video that would do the teaching for him. Also, whenever we did experiments, and I would ask for an explanation on why something gave a certain chemical reaction, he would just laugh at me and tell me that I should have paid attention during his explanation. An explanation that hadn't even taken place. Also, he would put stuff in his tests that wasn't even in the book, saying that we should be able to understand these things by using common sense. Please, how do you use common sense when solving equations? This was fifth-year material. Now, as you can imagine, everyone's grades were absolutely miserable. They were in fact so bad that I and a ton of others weren't even passing the year, and that when all of our other grades were okay, it was just the F in chemistry that didn't allow us to pass the whole year. I'm a good student who works incredibly hard to get good grades, and the prospect of me not passing the year gave me numerous panic attacks, even more when I talked to my mentor and she said she couldn't do anything about it. I decided to take action and asked classmates to ask their parents to start sending emails to this teacher, hoping that this would wake him up. It didn't. In fact, this guy didn't even respond to any of the emails that were sent to him. I was getting more and more frustrated with this teacher. I'm not someone who likes to confront people, but with the end of the school year coming closer and closer, I decided I had to take some kind of action. So I decided to confront him with his behavior. Scared as I was, I went up to this teacher after school to ask him why he was doing all of this, and why he didn't respond to any of the emails, etc. He, as always, just laughed and sent me away with a ton of sarcastic remarks. That got my blood boiling. I was so done with this guy. Pro-revenge incoming. I collected all of the emails that were sent to him, from both parents and students. I recorded a few of his classes on my iPad. We were a digital school, and although I was not actually allowed to do this, I didn't care about the rules anymore at this point, and just wanted to collect as much evidence as I could. These videos, of course, showed how much of a lousy teacher this guy was. I printed out the grades of all the students in my class, and you could clearly see all the E's and F's in chemistry on everybody's grade list. The best thing happened when I decided to record another confrontation with him, where he would actually say some pretty nasty things to me. He called me a lousy witch, and said my mother didn't do a good job at raising me. Of course I was extremely angry after, but oh so happy when I knew I got that on tape. When students out of his other classes heard about what I was doing, they were absolutely stoked and provided me with much more evidence. Videos of this guy going crazy in front of class, even more bad grades, etc. In the end, I made an incredibly long Google Doc with all the videos and pictures included. It was over 35 pages long, with all the evidence and statements on why this teacher was absolutely incompetent and begging for an exemption in this class. I sent it to all the important people of our school. 2 days later, I was taken out of English class by our warden, who then took me to his office and asked me for some more explanation on the matter. I explained everything to him in person, and told him that I knew my whole class would tell him the exact same story. I also asked him how come the school hadn't taken action in advance, seeing as literally everyone in the third year had a D or lower in chemistry class. He apologized and said this was in fact a horrible mistake. After this talk with the warden, he went straight to this horrible teacher's class and took him into his office. I don't know exactly what happened inside that office, but I can tell you that it was a lot messier when I and a classmate came back there after approximately 30 minutes. In the end, he was fired and everyone got an exemption in chemistry. The warden told me that he had tried to turn the tables and accuse me of lying and saying that he was lured into a trap. Sadly, a lot of people, including me, had to drop chemistry the next year due to a major disadvantage in the class. I'm happy he got fired though, and I passed the year.